He ridiculed her speech, her attire, and even her willingness to voice her opinions. Yet, she remained composed, initiated playback, and observed the legal system expose him live. Danielle Riggins, having experienced much in her 42 years, recognized inconsistencies. The citation affixed to her windshield near the community center in Macon, Georgia, wasn't simply irritating, it felt targeted. She studied it briefly, peering at the listed offense. A citation for failing to yield in a pedestrian zone was received. However, she was not in the vehicle at the time of the alleged violation. Her Honda had been parked legally in front of the building while she was inside, leading a workshop for at-risk teens. She sighed, placing the paper into her bag. Danielle dedicates long hours as a youth counselor, providing assistance to kids who'd experienced hardship and lack sufficient support. Her financial status is modest. She is far from wealthy. Her profession consumed her, and with raising her teenage daughter and guiding children who resembled her younger self, her time was scarce. A penalty like this was more than just disappointing, it significantly impacted her schedule. However, it wasn't primarily about the financial burden. It was about the underlying issue of fairness. The subsequent evening, she sat at the kitchen table with a cup of mint tea and the citation before her. Her daughter, Aaliyah, was completing homework in the vicinity. "You're really going to fight it?" Aaliyah inquired, looking up from her textbook. Danielle chuckled quietly. "Yes, I'm weary of allowing things to pass." Aaliyah reclined. "Do you believe they will truly hear you?" Danielle paused, not responding immediately. She simply gazed out the window for a moment before replying, "I don't require them to listen. I need to be present and proceed according to my conditions." The following Monday, she contacted the municipal courthouse, requested a half day away from work, and highlighted her court date in red pen on the calendar. She chose a simple outfit for the hearing: dark jeans, a light blouse, and flats. No blazer, no makeup, just her natural appearance. The woman she saw in the mirror appeared weary, but also resolute. As she prepared to leave, she placed her phone in her back pocket, activated the voice memo app, and began recording. It wasn't an expectation, but a habit formed by experience. She's learned that people sometimes react negatively when a black woman asserts herself with assurance. She reached the courthouse 30 minutes before the scheduled time. The building was a small, aged brick structure with faded signage. Several other individuals were present outside, primarily working-class people attempting to find a moment for justice amidst their jobs and obligations. Inside, the clerk called names with minimal acknowledgement. Danielle remained still, her hands resting in her lap, awaiting her turn. The courtroom felt chilly. It wasn't until she heard her name, Danielle Riggins, case 407B, that her heart began to race. She proceeded to the defendant's table, her heart steady but alert, mirroring the advice she's given to the children in her youth programs. One can't always dictate actions, but one can control one's response, she observed. And that's when she saw him. Judge Gregory Lannister. Late 50s, silver hair neatly combed back, reading glasses perched low on his nose. His reputation was well known. Some described him as firm, while others labeled him arrogant. He glanced at Danielle over the rim of his glasses, his eyebrows subtly raised. "Ms. Riggins," he stated, emphasizing her last name, "let's proceed. I presume you're here to contest this ticket, issued by a trained officer?" Danielle nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. I was inside a building, not driving, when the ticket was issued. I have witness statements available if required." He laughed, a genuine chuckle. "Naturally, you do," she replied, meeting his gaze. The judge then remarked, "You individuals frequently present narratives when appearing before the court. Always the victim. Never your fault. Let me guess. You didn't even see the officer writing it, right?" Her jaw tightened slightly. This wasn't simply skepticism. It was a more pointed feeling, and everyone in that courtroom could sense it. But Danielle remained composed, even as the atmosphere shifted. She recognized this was merely the start. Danielle did not react. She had encountered harsher remarks, both in delivery and purpose. However, hearing it from a judge in a courtroom populated by strangers carried a distinct discomfort. A heavy silence filled the room. People avoided reaction, though several eyes moved between her and the bench. Even the bailiff appeared uneasy. "Your Honor," Danielle stated, maintaining a calm voice, "I have proof I was inside. A sign-in log from the youth center. It displays my name and timestamp." Judge Lannister reclined in his chair and smirked. "You believe a log anyone can write improves anything? That's cute." A few quiet gasps arose from the back. Danielle noticed them. She also heard her heartbeat in her ears. But she remained focused. She wasn't present to be liked. She was present because she understood what was correct. "I'm simply requesting the citation be reviewed in light of the facts," she replied. "Oh, the facts," he mocked. "Well, let me tell you the facts. I've been doing this for over 20 years. I've seen all the angles. You people always want the rules bent when they don't go your way." The words landed like slaps. Not just the content, the way he said them. He treated her as if she were a child occupying his valuable time. Danielle remained silent. A response wasn't necessary. He examined her citation once more, leafing through several pages. "What is this?" he inquired. "You didn't even secure legal representation?" "No," she replied, her voice calm. "I am capable of representing myself." A brief, sharp laugh escaped him. "Naturally," he said, turning to the clerk. "Next time, we'll mandate representation. Perhaps that will eliminate the theatrics." A woman seated towards the back, middle-aged and white, holding a traffic ticket herself, noticed Danielle. She appeared stunned and visibly uncomfortable, quickly averting her gaze when Danielle's eyes met hers. Danielle paused, composing herself. She hadn't intended to confront authority, yet she wouldn't allow her dignity to be disrespected. "Your Honor," she began, carefully selecting each word, "I'd like the court reporter to read back your comments." The effect of this request was palpable, noticeably shifting the atmosphere in the room. Judge Lannister blinked. "Please repeat the last few remarks for the record." The court reporter, a young man named Vince, shifted in his chair. "Mr. Tiller," the judge snapped, "we don't have time for this. Just proceed." Danielle remained still. "Then I will replay it myself." She retrieved her phone from her back pocket. Several people in the gallery leaned forward, curious about what was about to happen. "Ms. Riggins," the judge stated, her voice now firm, "recording in a courtroom is a violation." "I recorded myself, not the proceedings," she responded softly. "It's legal in this state, particularly for personal safety." She indicated the screen. Her own voice played back, quiet and steady. Then his voice followed. Every word was audible. "You people always come in here with stories. That's cute." The statement reverberated in the room, seemingly as if the ceiling had split open. Judge Lannister's expression changed, initially showing confusion, then irritation, and finally something akin to fear. He leaned forward. "That recording is out of order," he stated. "No, sir," Danielle said quietly. "What you said was out of order." A low whistle escaped someone in the gallery, quickly stifled by a hand covering their mouth. The bailiff moved forward but refrained from touching her. He remained silent, positioned between the two, uncertain of his next action. Danielle returned the phone to her pocket. She didn't smile. She didn't appear smug. But she looked directly at the judge and didn't blink once. He lifted his gavel but didn't strike it. His eyes moved towards the court clerk, then to the bailiff. For a fleeting moment, he seemed to lose command of the room. However, the significant change didn't occur until the recess was called. That's when activity began behind the scenes. The judge announced a 15-minute recess, and the courtroom began to clear. Danielle rose, murmured, extended her limbs. Danielle remained seated. She wasn't finished. Her hands were still, fingers softly intertwined. She showed no tremor. Her composure wasn't rooted in fear. It was a calculated approach. She's worked with numerous children who were disadvantaged by systems that fail to hear them. She consistently advised them to record everything. Even quietude can serve as proof. Now, it was her turn to act on her own counsel. She retrieved her phone once more, this time to initiate a call. Danielle reviewed her contacts and selected one named Ethics Board Local, a number she had saved years earlier following a school board hearing involving one of her students. She hadn't anticipated needing it personally. A woman responded, stating, Judicial Oversight Office, South Georgia District. This is Ms. Carla Shep. How can I help? Danielle maintained a low, calm, and professional tone. Milisegon Shep. My name is Danielle Riggins. I am presently located at the Macon Municipal Courthouse, Room B. I have just experienced inappropriate conduct from a sitting judge. I possess an audio recording that potentially constitutes judicial misconduct. There was a pause on the line. I see, Ms. Shep stated slowly. Are you presently inside the courtroom? We're on recess. 15 minutes, give or take. Could you briefly describe what occurred? Danielle recounted the events accurately. Her summary contained no exaggeration, only factual details. The judge's comments, including mockery, the denial of the court reporter's request to read back the transcript, laughter, and dismissiveness were concerning. She stated, I have a voice memo of the remarks. I didn't record the courtroom, just my own audio. This is legal under state code, 16 to Order 11, 62. A pause followed, then the statement, Ms. Riggins, I'd like to escalate this to a supervising judicial officer. Can you remain in the courthouse? Her response was yes. The concluding words were, I'm dispatching someone now. Danielle ended the call, placed her phone in her purse, and released a quiet breath. She anticipated no accolades. She hadn't even expected victory, but she wasn't retreating. A young man, in his early 20s, visibly anxious and restless, approached her from across the room, waiting for his own case. Ma'am, he murmured, that was incredible. What you did required considerable bravery. Danielle offered a courteous smile. It's not bravery when it's simply the truth. He nodded swiftly and retreated. Several others glanced in her direction, not with sympathy, but with interest. Something was different. They sensed it. 10 minutes elapsed. People began returning to the courtroom. The judge was delayed. The clerk appeared anxious. Then the door beside the bench opened, but it wasn't Lannister who entered. A tall woman in her early 60s, dressed in a tailored gray suit with short platinum hair and sharp eyes, appeared. She proceeded directly to the clerk, bent forward, spoke quietly, and then looked up at the courtroom. Everyone, please remain seated, she announced. A murmur spread through the room. Judge Lannister will not be returning to the bench this morning. Danielle remained still. I am supervising Judge Merrill Vaughn, and I will be taking over this docket. She paused. Before we continue, I need to speak with Ms. Riggins privately. Please follow me, ma'am. Danielle stood, straightened her bag, and followed Judge Vaughn through the side door. The hallway felt narrow and was still. Judge Vaughn guided her into a small conference room and shut the door. I have listened to a portion of the recording, she stated without taking a seat. I'm also informed of a previous complaint against Judge Lannister. These details might support an active inquiry. Danielle remained motionless, observing her. I must ask, Vaughn proceeded, will you sign a sworn statement and present the recording as proof? Yes, Danielle responded without pause. Judge Vaughn nodded once. Unbeknownst to Danielle, her voice, recorded during a moment of quiet self-preservation, was poised to trigger events exceeding the expectations of anyone present in that courthouse. Danielle re-entered the courtroom, with Judge Vaughn immediately following. The atmosphere had noticeably changed. Conversations were subdued, and expressions were more attentive. Several individuals who had previously disregarded her were now attentive, observing her with what appeared to be respect, or perhaps curiosity. Regardless of the nature of their attention, she perceived it, yet remained composed. She returned to her seat at the defendant's table as Judge Vaughn approached the bench and addressed the court clerk. Proceeding with Case 407B, she announced, Ms. Danielle Riggins is present. Judge Lannister is officially recused pending review. The announcement settled over the room with a sharp impact. It wasn't simply a brief absence. The judge was gone, and seemingly without return. The thought remained unspoken, yet palpable. Danielle remained still, awaiting further instruction. Judge Vaughn examined the citation and Danielle's accompanying paperwork. This included the witness statement the center's login sheet, and even a timestamp text she had sent to her supervisor when she arrived that day. The judge looked up. "This is thorough, Ms. Riggins. You're clearly someone who values evidence." Danielle nodded once. "Working with young people, I've observed firsthand how things can unravel without proper preparation." There was a slight hesitation before Judge Vaughn responded. "It's a lesson more people should adopt as they mature, a subtle acknowledgement passing between them. It wasn't friendship. It wasn't sympathy, simply recognition. One woman seeing another who chose not to compromise." Judge Vaughn turned the citation over, wrote something, and gave it back to the clerk. "This citation is voided," she stated. Ms. Riggins was released. Danielle did not smile. She merely collected her belongings. However, before she could leave, the judge stated, "For the record, your behavior in this courtroom, considering the situation, was remarkable. You maintained composure and dignity despite an unfortunate series of events." Danielle then permitted herself a brief, weary smile. "Thank you," she said. She departed the room as silently as she had arrived. But the atmosphere outside was altered. The hallway was filled with a palpable sense of unease. A courtroom aide, a young woman wearing dark-rimmed glasses and speaking with a hesitant tone, softly stopped Danielle near the exit. "Are you the one who recorded him?" she inquired, her eyes widening. "I am," Danielle responded. The aide looked around before saying, "You weren't the first. But you might be the one who finally got them to act." Danielle raised her eyebrows a little. "Others tried. There have been complaints," she murmured. "But nothing ever stuck. Either no proof or no follow-through. It was difficult to gain traction until someone possessed the courage and the evidence." Danielle remained silent. She felt no need to speak. Stepping outside, she inhaled deeply. The air seemed heavier than normal, not due to the weather, but because of the events of the past hour. As she approached her vehicle, her phone vibrated in her pocket. A new voicemail had arrived. She pressed play. "Ms. Riggins, this is Agent Walt Desmond with the Georgia State Commission on Judicial Conduct. An initial recording from a Macon courthouse arrived this morning. We need to discuss a possible behavioral pattern concerning Judge Gregory Lannister. Please return our call at your earliest convenience." Danielle rested against the car door. Her intention wasn't to discredit a judge. She came to contest a traffic ticket. However, the truth unfolds according to its own schedule. And occasionally, when you voice a concern, you may inadvertently represent the interests of many others. By sundown that day, Danielle would discover the true extent of the situation. Danielle was halfway home when her phone rang again. She considered ignoring the call while driving, but the number displayed an official-looking area code for 7-8. She pulled over to the parking lot of a small grocery store in Warner Robins, parking under the shade of a faded sign, and answered, "Ms. Riggins, this is Agent Desmond. Thank you for returning the call." His voice remained calm, but was precise, a person who carefully considered words before speaking. "We reviewed the audio," he continued, "and it's clear. Furthermore, it corresponds with prior grievances against Judge Lannister submitted during the last 3 years. Your testimony could be crucial in initiating an internal ethics review that has been delayed." Danielle tightened her grip on the steering wheel with her free hand. "What are the next steps?" she asked. There was more, Desmond added. "An anonymous tip arrived this morning, shortly after your complaint was released on the internal channel. The tip contained financial records associated with Judge Lannister, including offshore transfers, unauthorized reimbursements, and a concerning pattern of rulings in favor of contractors with ties to a private law firm in Augusta." Danielle paused, visibly surprised. Could this be criminal corruption? Affirmative. And with this development, the situation extends beyond a simple personnel issue. It may involve criminal activity. She didn't respond immediately. Desmond continued, "You've already accomplished a lot. If you are willing, we might require a statement. You wouldn't be obligated to testify unless the investigation becomes more serious, and you would receive legal assistance throughout the process." Danielle breathed out, "I will do what is necessary." "Understood," he replied. "You will be contacted by one of our ethics advisors by end of day." "Thank you, Ms. Riggins. You've made more of a difference than you realize. The call concluded. Danielle remained still in her car for a few minutes, the quiet sound of far away traffic forming the backdrop. She wasn't certain whether she felt fear or power, perhaps a combination of both. She didn't share with Alia immediately, not due to concealment, but because she needed some time to process it herself. Later that evening, following dinner, as Alia cleaned the dishes, she inquired, "So, how did it go?" Danielle offered a small smile, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Let's just say I believe the judge won't be processing many more tickets." Alia grinned. "You didn't strike him, did you?" Danielle laughed. "No, darling, but I made my point." The television played the local 6 o'clock news in the background. Danielle wasn't truly paying attention until the anchor delivered news that caught her focus. Breaking. A municipal judge in Macon is currently suspended from their position while an investigation proceeds regarding claims of misconduct. These allegations include discriminatory behavior and potential ethics violations. Alia accidentally dropped a dish into the sink. "Wait, is that him? Is that your judge?" Danielle asked, slowly sitting down. "Looks like it," she replied. The anchor reported that sources verified the investigation began following a complaint filed earlier today by a local resident, an action that has now initiated an internal review of the judge's prior decisions. Financial documents, sent anonymously to the State Oversight Commission, seem to indicate connections between the judge and several private developers who have received advantages from his rulings. Alia looked at the screen, then at her mother, asking, "You really did that?" Danielle looked at her. "I didn't do all that. I just said something. The rest have been waiting to come out." Alia's face softened. "I'm proud of you, Mama." Danielle touched her daughter's cheek gently. "It's not always about being loud. Sometimes it's just about refusing to stay quiet." Her phone buzzed again, this time a text. New voicemail 1 minute long. She hit play. "Ms. Riggins, this is ADA Kendra Malloy from the Bibb County District Attorney's Office. Thank you for providing the recording. Judge Lannister was taken into custody this afternoon for questioning. Currently, the ethics violations are under formal review and criminal charges are being considered. We would appreciate the opportunity to speak further with you if you are available. Please contact me at your convenience." Danielle observed the screen, then looked up. Alia was watching her, eyes wide. "What now?" she asked. Danielle shook her head. "Now, I will call them back." Unbeknownst to her, a significant number of individuals would come forward in the days following, spurred by her resolute stance conveyed through a voice memo and unwavering resolve. Within 48 hours, Danielle's name circulated discreetly among legal offices, community groups, and even local newsrooms, not as a figure of fame, but as an emblem. She had not sought any of this recognition. She continued going to work, continued picking up Alia from school, and continued reminding the boys at the youth center to keep their pants up and their heads higher. However, things around her began to change. The first indication arrived the following week when Pastor Reuben Fields, who ran a coalition for court reform in Central Georgia, called her during her lunch break. "You don't know me, Ms. Riggins," he began, "but I've known about you since Tuesday. What you did. It wasn't insignificant." Danielle was in her car outside the community center, with a half-finished sandwich on her lap. "I didn't do it for attention." "I know," he stated. "That's why people are paying attention." He requested her to speak at a future town hall. A simple request, just a few words about resilience, about respect, about not allowing authority to dominate individuals who are not always able to retaliate. She paused, but ultimately consented. That evening, Alia assisted her in choosing her outfit. Danielle requested a simple event. Alia playfully suggested, while playfully tossing her a colorful scarf, that someone might capture the occasion for Instagram. "Might as well look unbothered and cute," she said. The town hall was unassuming, with folding chairs, plastic tablecloths, a few trays of donated cookies, and sweet tea. Danielle chose not to bring notes. She stood before approximately 50 people, hands by her sides, and spoke as if addressing one individual. "I didn't record that, Judge, because I wanted to take him down," she stated. "I acted because I'd witnessed too many deserving individuals disregarded, and I refused to suffer a similar fate," the audience acknowledged with nods. Several individuals dabbed their eyes. As she concluded her statement, the attendees rose to applaud. Subsequently, an older woman, adorned with a wide-brimmed hat and holding a folder, approached her. She identified herself as Geraldine Baker, a retired schoolteacher. I filed a complaint against that same judge in 2021. She stated, her voice gravelly but clear. They dismissed it, claiming it lacked merit. Perhaps now, someone would listen. Danielle took the folder from her hands. I'll ensure someone does. In the days that followed, Danielle received more calls. A podcast producer from Birmingham, a law student from Emory who wanted to write her thesis on ethical failures in lower courts, and a public defender in Albany who asked if Danielle would participate in a courtroom training session for junior attorneys. She declined most requests, not because she was indifferent. She simply wished to avoid having her name become a hashtag. Her goal was for the children she worked with to view her as the same woman who had taught them resume writing and guided them through difficult conversations with their parents. However, she agreed to certain requests, particularly when she understood how many individuals needed reassurance that they weren't irrational. Activity at the center increased. Contributions arrived from people residing outside of Macon. A woman in Tampa contributed 20 backpacks, along with a handwritten message, for the kids you champion and for the ones you're championing. Thank you, Danielle. Alia seemed to gain confidence, too. One afternoon, she announced, Ms. Brenner had us write in civics class about someone in our community who stood up for justice. I wrote about you. Danielle was surprised, asking, really? Alia replied casually, I was planning to choose John Lewis, but he's the obvious choice. Danielle chuckled. I don't think I'm in his league, Alia remarked. Danielle responded, I think you'd surprise yourself. What truly astonished Danielle, however, was the number of individuals who had been waiting quietly and with patience for another person to initiate action. 3 months later, Danielle was seated on the rear steps of the youth center shortly after closing time. The last of the teens had departed for the day, their laughter still resonating softly throughout the parking lot. The Georgia heat lingered, even as the sun descended, casting shadows on the fractured pavement. She took a drink from a water bottle and allowed her body to recover. It had been a demanding day and a demanding few months. She had presented at 4 panels, completed 2 interviews, and received a volume of inbox messages she couldn't manage. The investigation into Judge Lannister had expanded beyond her initial expectations. Following the release of the financial records, additional complaints emerged, not only from Macon, but also from surrounding counties. Rumors circulated suggesting the district attorney could file formal charges. The story had been featured on a national justice blog, and certain advocacy groups were now referencing Danielle's case in their training programs. However, all of that seemed secondary to what she truly prioritized. That day began with her witnessing Quentin, one of her teens, perform his debut spoken word poem at an open mic. He previously avoided eye contact. Now, he stood on stage, telling the audience, when they try to shrink you, that's proof you're already too big to fit their box. No applause was necessary. That single moment justified all the effort. While she was seated, the center's director, Mr. Lou Bailey, came outside. A large man with gentle eyes and a deliberate pace settled beside her with a soft exhale. You know, he began after a moment, most people wouldn't have acted as you did. Danielle kept her gaze forward. It didn't feel like a decision. He nodded thoughtfully. It rarely does when it's the correct action. We've seen staff depart and arrive, but I've never witnessed this place so lively. You provided these children with a unique experience. She allowed the sentiment to resonate. Occasionally, she stated, I believe I simply felt worn out, weary of holding it back. The man seemed to assume he could address me as if I possessed no value, and for a brief moment, I nearly allowed it. However, I then recalled the advice I impart to these children daily. Maintain your posture, make your voice heard, and I understood that I couldn't request that of them if I was unwilling to embody it myself. Mr. Bailey murmured a subdued, and then rose. Are you prepared to secure the premises? Yes. Please allow me a moment. Once he entered the building, Danielle gazed upwards at the sky. A few stars began to appear, dim and dispersed, yet present. She considered the individuals who had remained silent, perhaps because they believed their opinion wouldn't be impactful, or they feared negative consequences, or they were simply weary. And she understood. She genuinely did. However, someone must initiate action. That doesn't signify superiority. It simply indicates they were frustrated enough to proceed, even when the situation felt unstable. Prior to departing, she retrieved her phone and composed a brief message on her social media page, an account she hadn't accessed in weeks. The message read, "If it feels like no one sees you, speak anyway. If it feels like they don't hear you, speak anyway. You never know who's watching." After pausing, waiting for a reason to share, she posted, placed her phone in her bag, and secured the door behind her. Occasionally, bravery appears forceful, accompanied by raised fists and resounding chants. Sometimes, the path to change is not dramatic. It can be quiet, consistent, respectful, and involves simply appearing in a courthouse, even when unexpected. Danielle didn't require a platform to create change. She only needed to be present, speak honestly, and refuse to be silenced. In doing so, she not only defended herself, but also created an opportunity for Geraldine, for Quentin, for every voice that had been overlooked for too long, because authentic justice doesn't always begin with grand gestures. Occasionally, it begins with the youngest, with someone unwilling to yield. Should this narrative resonated with you, if it brought to mind someone in your life, or perhaps even reminded you of yourself, please consider subscribing, sharing it, and discussing it, as stories like this are not simply intended to be heard, but meant to be remembered. For years, she evaded consequences for her inappropriate behavior, until she struck a formally attired black man in court, unaware that he was the judge. The immediate aftermath shattered everything she had established. It unfolded rapidly, unexpectedly. Neither the bailiff, the court reporter, nor even the defendant seated anxiously in the front row anticipated it. Officer Tiffany Rourke had just entered courtroom 2B within the Franklin County Courthouse in Missouri. Her uniform was impeccable, her jaw set, as was her habit. She had established a reputation over the last 10 years, known for being authoritative, direct, and someone to avoid provoking. That morning, she was scheduled to testify in a minor drug possession case. However, she did not reach the witness stand. She noticed a sharply dressed black man standing close to the witness box, speaking softly with one of the attorneys. Without hesitation, she swiftly crossed the courtroom floor and slapped him across the face. The impact resonated through the room. A gasp followed, shared and instantaneous. You could hear the sound of papers falling, a pen rolling onto the floor. For a moment, everything seemed to still. Everyone remained motionless. The man showed no reaction. He didn't flinch, yell, lunge, or raise a hand. He calmly adjusted his tie, brushed his cheek with the back of his hand, and looked her directly in the eye. "I'm Judge Antoine Kelly," he stated, his voice even and deliberate, "and I'm presiding over this courtroom today." That silence? It wasn't just shock anymore. It was palpable, a heavy presence. Every pair of eyes focused on Tiffany, who now appeared as if she'd swallowed a bucket of nails. She blinked once, twice, her mouth barely moving as if struggling to speak. The bailiff, hesitant about the situation, moved restlessly near the door. The young public defender close by immediately reached for her phone, documenting the scene discreetly. Others followed suit. Within seconds, at least 4 phones were recording the event. Tiffany attempted to speak. "I thought he wasn't supposed to be," but the moment had passed. Judge Kelly addressed the silent courtroom and announced, "We're taking a 10-minute recess." Then, he entered his chambers, silent, his expression unreadable. The room remained still. No one knew whether to stand, sit, or depart. Tiffany remained motionless. Her hand, the one she'd used, trembled subtly at her side. The prosecutor approached her and whispered, "You just assaulted a judge." Tiffany gazed at him, visibly pale and blinking quickly, as if the foundation had been removed from beneath her. The news spread rapidly. News reporters, awaiting a separate gang indictment case, quickly entered the hallway. Interns, having left the room visibly shaken, alerted two local news outlets. By noon, the video appeared on social media. It was unedited, uncontextualized footage depicting a white police officer in uniform striking a black judge in the courtroom. The accompanying caption on many reposts read, "Cop slaps a judge, unaware he is a judge." Initially, several commenters questioned its authenticity, suggesting it might be staged. The video lacked polish. It mirrored the unpredictable nature of everyday existence. There was no background music, no dramatic camera work, only palpable tension and genuine emotions. Subsequently, responses emerged from lawyers, activists, and former defendants, each possessing unique perspectives. Some immediately identified Tiffany, while others knew her through her reputation. Judge Kelly, however, remained silent. He released no public statement, avoided television appearances, and refrained from pursuing legal action. He remained seated behind his desk, reviewing the day's schedule as if nothing had occurred. However, everyone else recognized a significant change, the kind of change that leaves a lasting impact. Yet, before anyone could fully understand the implications, questions began to surface. What was the truth about Officer Tiffany Rourke? Prior to the incident, most individuals outside of Franklin County were unfamiliar with the name Tiffany Rourke. Within the force, however, she wasn't merely recognized, she was feared. Tiffany's ascent was rapid. Some believe it was too rapid. After graduating from the academy in her early 20s, she progressed to patrol, then narcotics, and subsequently to a specialized task force concentrating on high-risk neighborhoods. She received medals, appeared in department newsletters, and presented at 2 police conferences. However, beyond the publicized events and formal greetings, there existed another facet of Tiffany, the one largely unknown to the public. The initial signs were subtle. A young black driver, ticketed for a broken taillight, asserted he had not violated any laws. When he attempted to explain his situation, Tiffany increased the fine, citing noncompliance. He subsequently submitted a formal complaint, which was not addressed. A Latina mother reported that Tiffany conducted a vehicle search without justification outside a grocery store. When her 10-year-old daughter inquired about the reason, Tiffany responded, "You people should know better." The mother became distressed and filed a report, which was closed within a week. Subsequently, an event occurred that nearly reached the media. A video surfaced showing Tiffany verbally abusing 2 black teenagers seated outside a convenience store. She accused them of loitering. One of the teenagers recorded her outburst. However, the clip disappeared after the boys were arrested for resisting. There were also rumors circulating within the department's locker rooms and among court clerks. Tiffany reportedly used derogatory language when she believed she wasn't being observed. She allegedly threatened junior officers who did not support her in their official reports. Whenever her name surfaced in a formal grievance, the Internal Affairs Division discreetly marked the file as not sustained. She benefited from influential connections, including Chief Brannon, who described her as a capable officer navigating difficult circumstances. He believed the public lacked comprehension regarding the demands of policing in those communities. Fellow officers, such as Officer Sam Delaney, recognized the pattern early on. He once attempted to voice his concerns after witnessing Tiffany forcefully push a suspect's head against a cruiser window. She informed me that if I submitted any documents, my locker would be emptied by Monday. Consequently, he withdrew. They all did, not because they shared her perspective, but because Tiffany embodied the established order. She wasn't a deviation from it, nor an unusual case. She was the system. She represented the convergence of power and prejudice disguised by authority. And it wasn't simply her behavior. It was the confidence stemming from her perceived immunity. Around 6 months prior to the courtroom incident, a newly appointed officer, Jordan McLean, submitted a formal complaint following 2 weeks of riding alongside her. During that time, she halted 6 vehicles in a single day. All the drivers were black, and they were all within the same 3-block area. He documented in the internal log that none of the stops were warranted. McLean was then reassigned to desk duty 2 weeks later. Tiffany received a commendation. The underlying issue wasn't solely Tiffany's actions. It was the fact that others allowed her behavior to continue. Her advancement within the department wasn't in spite of her conduct, it stemmed from it. However, vulnerabilities had been appearing for some time prior to the incident involving Judge Kelly. Previously dismissed grievances began to reappear discreetly. The Internal Affairs Division had undergone a change in leadership, and recently elected city council members showed less willingness to ignore problematic issues. Yet, Tiffany remained unchanged. In fact, her actions intensified. At a precinct barbecue, she dismissed the evolving situation as political maneuvering, declaring to her colleagues, "They can't touch me. I possess more damaging information about a significant portion of this department than they have about me." She was unaware of this fact. However, that wasn't a display of influence. It was a countdown, and it had already begun. But when she delivered that false accusation in court, targeting the incorrect individual in the most detrimental location, that countdown reached zero. Consequently, the entire system she had depended on started to falter. When Judge Antoine Kelly returned to his chambers, he didn't forcefully close the door. He didn't discard any objects. He didn't raise his voice. He simply took a seat. He inhaled, moved closer, and grasped the pile of case files on his desk as if it were a routine Tuesday. However, it was anything but. This was unprecedented for the numerous individuals present in that courtroom. It was unusual for the lawyers who had witnessed considerable stress. But it was especially shocking for everyone involved. Nobody had ever seen a uniformed officer strike a sitting judge. Kelly had served as a judge for 12 years, primarily in Franklin County. He preferred a modest demeanor. He avoided publicity. He favored simple ties. He kept photos of his wife and 3 sons on his bookshelf, alongside a miniature gavel his youngest made in woodshop. Those who knew him understood one thing. His quiet presence carried weight. He had grown up in St. Peters, Missouri. He was the first in his family to go to college, then law school. He worked in public defense for 7 years before switching sides. He'd seen every kind of case, the petty, the tragic, the senseless. He treated them all with the same steady focus. The scene in that courtroom was jarring. That slap? It was a familiar feeling for him. Disrespect had been a constant companion throughout his career. However, this was unlike anything he's experienced, not a subtle insult, but a physical act performed publicly and undeniably. Remarkably, he didn't react with anger or boasting. Kelly avoided theatrics. He prioritized accountability. In the hallway, his clerk, Monique Barnes, remained motionless, still clutching the folder she was intending to present prior to the incident. She entered his office cautiously. "Are you all right?" she inquired. He looked up, appearing composed. "I'm fine." She took a seat, her gaze carefully observing his face for any indication of anger. "I don't know what she thought she was doing," Monique stated. "We can file something. Press charges. The footage is already widespread." He nodded. "We could, but I want to observe how they manage it." She inclined her head. "You mean the department?" he asked, folding his hands. "The entire system." He continued. "Let's see if it's still averse to accountability." Monique noticed his approach. She understood his method. He wouldn't be aggressive. He would wait and allow them to reveal their intentions. By lunchtime, Judge Kelly's name was widely discussed online. People recalled him from a graduation speech delivered at a local high school 2 years prior. Video segments reappeared. Notable statements were shared. The law isn't a weapon. It's a tool, and it belongs to everyone, not just the loudest voices. However, he remained silent. He did not post on social media or issue a formal declaration. Responding to inquiries from reporters at the close of the day regarding potential charges, he offered this statement. "I anticipate the same level of professionalism and accountability that I have demonstrated to others over the past 12 years. I am confident that the system will address this appropriately." The situation presented a challenge, concealed by a demeanor of composure, and this was perceived by those around him. Concurrently, within the department, the atmosphere was becoming strained. The chief's assistant had left 3 messages on Tiffany's voicemail. A discreet inquiry was sent to HR by legal counsel representing the county. Simultaneously, at least 2 junior officers had reported being ill, seemingly to avoid involvement in the escalating situation. However, Kelly refrained from pressing the matter, as it was unnecessary. The recorded footage conveyed a more compelling narrative. Later that evening, at their residence, his wife, Nadine, sat beside him on the couch, holding his hand. "You should have permitted them to remove her in handcuffs," she stated softly. "I desired to do so," he confessed, "but I did not." She sighed, recognizing it wouldn't resolve the situation. "You think this time will be different?" He glanced at their joined hands. "I believe this time she chose the wrong man in the wrong place at the precise right moment." But if Tiffany thought the silence indicated defeat, she was about to discover just how resounding dignity could become when the nation was finally observing. By the following morning, Tiffany Rourke was placed on administrative leave. The official email from the department provided little detail. An investigation is underway concerning an incident involving court personnel. However, the details did not require a formal announcement. They were widely disseminated. The event rapidly spread online, with news broadcasts repeatedly showing it. Podcasts offered detailed analyses, and online forums were filled with accounts from individuals claiming prior negative experiences with her. A video surfaced from 4 years prior, depicting Tiffany arguing with a teenage boy during a traffic stop. The footage, grainy and captured by dashcam, showed her words slurred slightly, and her tone menacing. The boy had been released without charges. However, the recording remained unseen until now. This time, people weren't just speaking, they were paying attention. And her badge offered no protection. Within the department, disarray reigned. Officers murmured in hallways. Her closest allies, those who previously joked with her at Friday briefings, now abruptly had other commitments when she approached. A memo from Internal Affairs began circulating. "We are seeking interviews with individuals who work directly under or alongside Officer Rourke." More than a dozen officers responded within 24 hours. Some did not provide their names. One of these officers, Detective Naomi Brennan, stated that she had waited almost 6 years to share her information. According to Naomi, she had previously threatened to reassign me to the county jail rotation if I questioned her reports again. A patrol officer, previously a cadet, recounted an instance where Tiffany placed a flashlight beneath a suspect's seat to create a pretext for a search. She referred to this as insurance, claiming no one would review her recorded footage. The situation had escalated beyond the initial incident. What began as a single event became a catalyst. Subsequently, a series of previously concealed issues were exposed. The Internal Affairs Department initiated a review of her prior reports, conducting comparisons. Analysis revealed certain trends, an imbalance in stops, and uncertain reasons given for those stops. The complaints persisted. Meanwhile, Tiffany attempted to shape the story. She contacted a local conservative talk show host, providing a hesitant phone interview, alleging the judge had appeared threatening and made a sudden action. The interview failed to gain traction. Even her consistent supporters hesitated. The sound of public relations defenses weakening became palpable when the host abruptly ended the segment, stating they would await further information before drawing conclusions. Subsequently, an email arrived from her union lawyer. "A conflict of interest prevents me from continuing to represent you in this situation. Essentially, you're facing significant public scrutiny." Her inbox was flooded with messages. Journalists contacted her. Friends ceased responding. Even her daughter, 19-year-old Avery, a college freshman, sent a brief text. "Why would you do that, Mom?" Tiffany was seated in her kitchen. The once esteemed medals from her service were positioned above the refrigerator. They appeared altered now, more burdensome, as though they no longer belonged to her. She continued to feel she hadn't erred significantly. Not truly. He appeared like a perpetrator, she murmured, by herself at her kitchen table. He shouldn't have been present there, attired as he was, speaking as if he controlled the situation. Yet, she was aware. This wasn't about what Judge Kelly wore or his location. It was about her instinct, the one she never scrutinized, the one that had secured her advancements, esteem, and apprehension, but never responsibility. And now, that instinct had transformed into a destructive force. 2 days following the incident, the Franklin County Police Department conducted a press conference. Marking the first time in 15 years, the chief was accompanied by legal counsel. We do not endorse Officer Rourke's behavior in the courtroom. An internal investigation is underway. We are treating this matter with utmost seriousness. He offered no praise, such as describing her as a good cop or noting distinguished service. He provided no words of support, just facts, objective and detached. Tiffany observed the press conference on her living room television, mirroring the actions of everyone else. However, if she believed the lack of communication from her colleagues was the most challenging aspect, she was soon to discover the consequences of the foundation she relied upon gradually disintegrating, piece by piece. Tiffany previously moved through the department with an air of ownership. That was no longer the case. Those few who still met her gaze did so fleetingly and anxiously, as if they wished to avoid association with her. The precinct felt different now. Her firm authority had vanished, leaving an unsettling emptiness. It was as if a flawed painting had been removed, yet the fastener remained embedded in the wall. The period of administrative leave stretched on, devoid of salary, identification, and explanation, only a prolonged wait. At her residence, her sphere of influence diminished rapidly. Her daughter, Avery, had ceased responding to messages, not since the night of the incident. They had not shared a particularly close bond. Tiffany had guided her upbringing with structure rather than affection. Now, the silence felt different. She attempted to call again. "This is your mom. Please, just talk to me." The line disconnected after the initial ring. Tiffany looked at her phone for a significant time before setting it face down. She had believed for so long that she was in charge, that people's fear indicated respect, that those internal criticisms were merely background noise from individuals who didn't comprehend the demands of the position. Now, she sat at her kitchen table, the blinds partially drawn to obscure the camera van parked across the street. Her time was abundant, and the silence was profound. She had not yet been charged. However, the department was no longer offering her protection. The union had ceased communication. The lawyers had stopped responding. Simultaneously, further allegations surfaced. A civil rights watchdog group submitted a petition demanding an independent review of each case she had handled during the previous 5 years. Individuals began to come forward, one after another. Individuals previously considered suspects. Former officers, even a retired judge who remembered Tiffany yelling at a defendant during a trial. He had dismissed it then as stress. She checked online to read the comments, simply out of curiosity. Rourke exemplifies the need for reform. This woman believed she was above the law. She antagonized the wrong judge. Fortunately, and then the most damaging remarks, from people who asserted they were her friends. I consistently felt uneasy about her. Her behavior was consistently overly assertive. I recall an instance where she laughed following a child's tears in an interrogation room. That moment remains vivid. It wasn't disloyalty, it felt like obliteration, as if she had no connection to them whatsoever. Her voicemail was overflowing with messages. Reporters, civil attorneys, and even a woman from a documentary company inquiring whether Tiffany would consider sharing her perspective. She did not respond to the call. The garage offered her a semblance of security. She would sit in the car, engine off, doors locked. She would spend hours inside, mechanically performing tasks, revisiting past cases in her thoughts, repeatedly telling herself that none of this would have occurred if that judge had recused himself, if he hadn't been attempting to create a disruption. However, regardless of how many ways she analyzed the situation, she couldn't alter the fact that she had slapped a man in open court, a man who presented no danger, who was not a suspect, who held the position of a sitting judge, and the entire country witnessed it. During one afternoon, her neighbor, Mrs. Beasley, who previously waved at her during morning jogs, passed by with her dog and did not even acknowledge Tiffany. That small instance affected her more than anticipated. The subtle dismissal, the courteous rejection, it felt more impactful than the news reports. Because news reports disappear, but being overlooked, that remains. She magnified her image. Sunglasses, a smirk, her hand rested on her hip. At the time, she believed she projected power. Now, she perceived only arrogance. However, just as she felt her decline had reached its lowest point, a letter arrived. It requested her presence at a public hearing, an event that would expose everything and compel her to confront the one man who never increased his volume, but had already undermined her legacy. A public hearing was planned for a Thursday morning at 9:30 a.m. inside the Franklin County Municipal Assembly Hall. The venue itself indicated that this would not be a routine, closed-door assessment. It was intended to be observed. When Tiffany arrived, dressed in a simple black suit, without any identification or weapons, the room was already mostly filled. Journalists occupied the rear wall, their audio equipment attached to their belts. The folding chairs creaked as residents, activists, and legal observers filled them. Behind a line of junior prosecutors, in the second row, sat Judge Antoine Kelly. He wore a dark gray suit instead of a robe, with a legal pad resting on his knee. His eyes were calm, and he appeared to be someone who had come to work, present to observe, not to punish. Tiffany's lawyer, recently appointed and a young public defender who had accepted her case with some hesitation, stood next to her, offering instructions she barely registered. Facing them, the Civilian Review Board was arranged in a semicircle of plastic nameplates and serious faces. Present were a retired detective, a former public defender, a local pastor, a community organizer, and a judge from another county. Although it wasn't a courtroom, it felt much like one. Chairwoman Ms. Loretta Vaughn initiated the session precisely. Her voice possessed a sharp clarity that commanded attention. This hearing is not a trial. It is a public review of Officer Tiffany Rourke's conduct, encompassing both recent events and her past record, and assessing its relevance to her continued ability to serve in law enforcement. Tiffany Rourke visibly reacted to the phrase, "continue serving," as if suggesting that possibility remained. It felt, to her, as though this wasn't the conclusion of her career. The proceedings commenced with the courtroom video, displayed on a modest monitor that inadequately conveyed the gravity of the situation, yet allowed for no dispute. The audio reverberated softly within the hall. The sound of the strike, the ensuing quiet, Judge Kelly's composed voice. Following this, testimony was presented. Officer Naomi Brennan delivered her written account concerning the threat Tiffany issued 6 years ago. Her tone remained even but detached. Subsequently, 2 individuals previously arrested testified, both noting that Tiffany's name appeared in their official records, even though they were not present during the incidents. She reportedly authorized their arrests without providing any clarification. A succession of witnesses offered similar accounts, while Tiffany remained still, her gaze fixed forward, exhibiting no visible response. Towards the conclusion of the proceedings, the chairwoman requested Judge Kelly to approach the microphone. He arrived without legal documents or written notes, simply standing with his jacket fastened and then speaking. I will not take this board's time reiterating what everyone witnessed. That information is already part of the public record. He began. What I want to focus on is what follows accountability, because that's where the essential work commences. He paused. A few pens scratched against paper. I have served this county for over a decade. I have observed people commit reckless actions out of fear. I have seen people lash out because they felt insignificant. But what transpired that day in my courtroom was neither fear nor a mistake. It was an instinctive reaction developed over years of unrestricted authority. He shifted subtly, just enough to connect with Tiffany's gaze. I'm not present to destroy anyone's life. I'm here to bring this community to remember what justice should embody, and what it must not resemble evermore. Then he took his seat. There was no applause, no acknowledgments, only silence. Tiffany's legal representative offered some concluding remarks, largely formal, primarily requesting compassion. It was inconsequential, The board observed a short break prior to releasing their recommendation. Officer Tiffany Rourke was scheduled for permanent removal from duty. All benefits were to be revoked, and her conduct would be referred to the state attorney for further review. She remained still, appearing detached, as the room cleared. The way people regarded her had changed, not with fear or even animosity, but with a lack of interest. That absence of concern felt particularly painful. Judge Kelly passed her as he left. He did not pause. He did not glance back. Because some individuals do not require revenge, the truth was sufficient. Long after the cameras stopped flashing, the question lingered. What lesson would the community retain from the quiet that ultimately compelled the system to respond? Weeks elapsed. The headlines diminished. Other controversies gained prominence. Yet, in Franklin County, a change occurred. Genuinely this time. Not merely in hushed conversations, not in secret meetings, but in the way people viewed the system, in the way they viewed one another. The courtroom where it happened remained active. Cases proceeded as they always did. However, a palpable shift occurred when Judge Antoine Kelly entered the room. Everyone rose with a distinct air of reverence, not solely due to his position, but because of how he conducted himself. He never sought recognition or accolades. He consistently performed his duties. On one afternoon, following a juvenile hearing, a young public defender approached him in the hallway. "Can I ask you something, Judge?" She inquired, looking around. She then asked, "That day, how did you stay calm?" He paused for a moment. I preferred not to give her what she anticipated. Then he smiled gently. He nodded once, and he walked on. That response lingered with her, and it resonated through the courthouse in other ways. Officers began participating in revised bias training that held genuine significance. A community board was granted substantive authority, more than just a nameplate and a folding table. Certain old case files were examined. Not every single one, but a selection, sufficient to signal that the doors were beginning to open. Regarding Tiffany Rourke, she reseated. She divested her home discreetly and relocated to a new area spanning 3 counties. There were no interviews granted, nor any public announcements made. She secured employment in private security for a shipping company. Her name ceased to be prominently featured in news reports, appearing only occasionally as a minor reference in opinion pieces. There was no return to public life, no narrative of recovery. Her decline wasn't sudden, it was gradual. Yet, what she forfeited was the sole thing of consequence to her: authority. And in its place, a silence settled that she couldn't alter. Simultaneously, more individuals stepped forward. Individuals harmed by fellow officers. Significant events, all fueled by what they witnessed in the courtroom. They sought not retribution, but recognition. That was the impact. The incident when Tiffany struck Judge Kelly was pivotal. It represented the culmination of a previously concealed history, a truth that resonated with the public. In a community like Franklin County, where progress typically unfolded gradually and discreetly, such visibility had a profound effect, extending far beyond the police department. The event disrupted the routines of an entire community. During a town hall meeting held 2 months afterward, a woman addressed the group. She appeared older, with her glasses slipping down her nose, and spoke with a steady voice. "I don't want another apology," she stated. "I want policies. I want change that doesn't wait for the next viral video." The room acknowledged her sentiment, understanding precisely what she meant. They understood because they had witnessed the repercussions when someone believes their badge provides immunity from accountability. Reality entered the room, presenting itself with the authority of a judge. This wasn't a fabricated narrative. There were no 11th-hour collapses, no sensational admissions. Instead, it was the gradual decline of an individual from a position of high regard, and the subsequent, equally deliberate effort to construct something more substantial in its place. The confines of that courtroom would forever remember the events that transpired within them. The initial impact might diminish. The media attention may dissipate, but the underlying principle endured. Unfettered power can become destructive. A lack of expression can carry more weight than vocal protest. And genuine justice doesn't require a forceful declaration to be acknowledged. What lessons can we draw from these observations? Perhaps it's that a person's true nature invariably emerges when no one appears to be observing, when a feeling of invulnerability takes hold, or when a facade falls away in a moment that cannot be retrieved. Tiffany established a dominion based on intimidation. Judge Kelly cultivated his standing through composure. Only one of them presently holds a position in the setting, ultimately, that embodies justice. Should this account prompt reflection, evoke emotion, or simply inspire a moment of consideration, please subscribe to the channel. We share narratives that others hesitate to explore, with truth as our guiding principle. The CEO, known for his quiet demeanor, entered his own dealership incognito. What he overheard a salesman say to a struggling single mother abruptly halted him and initiated an unforeseen sequence of events. Derek Belton appeared unremarkable, certainly not the person who authorized salaries for 137 employees. He wasn't wearing a blazer, didn't carry a briefcase, and he arrived without a driver. That morning, he wore faded Levi's, well-worn sneakers, and a Tennessee Titans cap shading his face. He would be unrecognizable, even to the regional manager he had dined with 2 Fridays prior. He parked his black 2011 Honda Accord a short distance away. It wasn't a necessity. He possessed the means for a garage full of luxury vehicles. However, today was not about displays of wealth. He walked the additional block quietly, noticing the texture of the pavement with each footfall. As the dealership appeared, the signage, crisp and prominent, displaying Belton Auto Group across the glass, caused him to hesitate. His name. But what was happening beneath the surface? The concerns had initially surfaced as quiet remarks. A customer in Murfreesboro reported being sold an extended warranty she didn't comprehend. A family in Franklin alleged their monthly payment differed from the agreed-upon amount. These were minor issues. However, they caused Derek to question things. This location in Charlotte, Tennessee had consistently been a high-volume dealership. It specialized in mid-range vehicles and enjoyed strong sales. People trusted this dealership, or they once did. The showroom doors opened as he entered. The air held the scent of coffee and Armor All. A bell chimed above him, yet no one acknowledged it. Derek surveyed the area. There were 3 sales desks and 2 salesmen engaged in conversation by the corner water cooler. A woman managed the reception desk, absorbed in her phone. He appeared unremarkable, and that was his intention. He began his assessment in the service bay. It was quiet, the technicians working diligently, focused on their tasks. He observed nothing unusual. He proceeded through the customer waiting area, observing a man browse a magazine as his daughter entertained herself on a damaged iPad. He received no assistance. There was no greeting, not even a simple acknowledgement. He approached the line of Camrys situated near the glass wall. A couple stood close by, engaged in a conversation with a salesman whose speech was rapid and overly enthusiastic. The older man appeared displeased. The woman seemed bothered. "Sir," the salesman stated, "you won't locate a more advantageous offer anywhere. This item is covered by warranty and has seen minimal use. However, I can offer this price only if we finalize the agreement today." "That's the current situation," Derek mentioned. He recognized this as a tactic he hadn't been taught and made a note to himself. He then proceeded around a corner close to the used inventory office and paused. A young woman, likely in her late 20s, wearing a light jacket and carrying a baby in a carrier, was speaking with a man in a navy blazer. She appeared anxious, repeatedly looking down at a well-worn envelope she held. It likely contained pay stubs or a bank statement. The salesman presented himself with an assured, perhaps overly confident, demeanor, speaking with charm and certainty. "You're receiving full coverage for the first 3 years?" the salesman stated. "Bumper to bumper plus powertrain. If anything breaks, even the air conditioning, it's covered." That was inaccurate. And the $895 fee I referenced, that's standard practice. We apply that to all our transactions. It covers a comprehensive pre-delivery inspection, interior cleaning, and anti-theft VIN etching. Derek paused. "VIN etching?" That practice had been removed from the dealership's process 3 years prior. And warranty coverage? No, that wasn't consistent with the terms. He had personally revised those contracts to ensure greater honesty and transparency. His pulse decelerated. He retreated a step back, out of their line of sight, heart pounding, but not from anger. It was disappointment. This was his business. This was his name. And this man was deceiving, with ease, a woman who appeared to have saved every cent to be present. Derek wasn't prepared to show himself. Not yet. He needed to observe the situation's extent. Derek moved discreetly behind a row of brochures close to the finance office, watching unseen. The woman nodded slowly in response to the salesman's words. Her fingers closed more firmly around the envelope. The baby in the carrier shifted and emitted a quiet whimper, but she seemed largely unaware. She was attempting to remain calm, likely assessing how closely the figures aligned with her budget. The salesman leaned in, lowering his voice. "You don't need to worry," he said. "People get nervous about credit checks, but I know how to navigate the process. I'll get you into a vehicle today, even if we have to be resourceful." She hesitated, her eyes flicking toward the exit. But the salesman kept his tone steady, reassuring. Too smooth, too confident, Derek clenched his jaw, then turned away. He didn't want her to feel observed. He walked towards the far end of the showroom, where a teenage boy was standing near a pre-owned SUV. A salesman passed him twice, without a greeting or any offer of assistance. He simply walked by. Derek moved next to the boy. "You're considering this one?" he asked. The teen looked over, seemingly a little taken aback. "Yeah, possibly. My aunt is outside. She asked me to check it out while she parks." Derek nodded. "Do you know what kind of engine it has?" The kid shrugged. "Not really. She simply requires a secure environment. Her vehicle malfunctioned last week, another incident. Another customer was missed. It was hurtful, not due to the lost transaction, but because it confirmed everything for Derek. At some point, they had ceased to listen, stopped acknowledging individuals. And it wasn't just a single problematic employee. It was a prevailing attitude, a recurring behavior. He proceeded towards the reception desk. The woman still hadn't looked up. She tapped her screen, chewing her gum, scrolling. Derek positioned himself in front of her, simply to gauge the situation. 10 seconds elapsed. Then 20. At last, she raised her head and blinked. "Oh, do you have an appointment?" "No," Derek replied calmly. "Just browsing." She responded with a languid smile, gesturing vaguely towards the floor. "They'll get to you." They did not. For the subsequent 30 minutes, Derek moved between various departments. The only assistance he received came from a young lot attendant named Trevor, who appeared to be no older than 19. He noticed Derek close to the service entrance and offered, "Sir, do you need anything? We have water inside. I can get you a brochure if you're interested in the new hybrids." Derek smiled and replied, "I'm good. Thank you." He then asked, "What's your name?" Trevor responded, "Trevor." "Do you like it here, Trevor?" Trevor paused. "It's all right. People can be rude. Not just customers, but sometimes managers too. I prefer to keep to myself." "Do they treat customers fairly?" Trevor looked down. Most of the time. There was no bitterness in his tone. Derek placed a reassuring hand on the kid's shoulder. "Be careful who teaches you what," he advised. Trevor looked at him, then nodded. Before Derek could say anything further, a familiar laugh came from the glass hallway. Brent Collar, the salesman, was now leading the young mother toward a side office. Her name tag said Brent Collar. She appeared overwhelmed, holding her papers tightly. Derek kept a discreet distance as he watched. Brent paused before the office door, retrieved paperwork from a file, and announced, "Here's the first quote. It's going to appear high initially, but please don't worry. I'll adjust it once I input your information into the system. This is our standard procedure." Derek moved nearer, feigning interest in a flyer on the wall. From his position, he observed the quote. The figures were inflated. Listed were charges for warranty, dealership fees, VIN etching, and a maintenance guarantee, all non-standard and unapproved. This was everything Derek had worked to eliminate years prior. Brent, however, did not appear to be a person apprehensive about disregarding regulations. He presented as someone who believed no one was observing. Brent indicated for the woman to take a seat. She settled into the chair, moving her baby's carrier to the floor nearby. The little girl made a soft whimpering sound and kicked gently, yet Brent did not even look down. His gaze remained focused on the documents he held, turning pages, emphasizing sections, and drawing circles. Each action appeared rehearsed, refined, and routine. We're going to structure this to ensure your monthly payment stays under $350, he stated. The woman offered a slow, cautious nod. What's your name again? He inquired, barely looking up. Monique, she replied. Monique Ellis. Derek stood just outside the office, back against the wall, feigning interest in the certified pre-owned display. He overheard every word. Brent smiled. All right, Monique. You're going to love this. You're approved for a 2019 Corolla. Excellent condition, low mileage. That's a significant advantage. We remain committed to your protection. Therefore, we're providing a 3-year full coverage plan. This includes everything from the engine to the electronics. Roadside assistance is also included should you lock your keys in the car. That level of peace of mind? Priceless. Derek's hand slowly curled into a fist by his side. However, there was no such plan, not like Brent described it. And the quote, the one he'd caught a glimpse of earlier, had extra charges tucked in every margin. Some of them were outright fiction. Monique adjusted in her chair. So, is all of that included in the price? Brent offered a warm, reassuring smile. It's all part of your protection package. We simply itemize it separately on the form. This simplifies things for the finance office. He continued, speaking rapidly and with excessive confidence, gesturing with a pen as if performing a magic trick. He even produced a calculator to minimize the appearance of the payment amount. For example, without the package, your monthly cost would be $384. With the included safeguard, the price reduces to $349. More manageable, isn't it? Derek scrutinized the figures. That calculation appeared illogical. It seemed like a deceptive tactic. He couldn't fathom how Brent maintained his composure. But it was evident this wasn't his first presentation. Then Monique posed a question that silenced the room. Do you believe I could return tomorrow? She inquired softly. I simply want to ensure I fully grasp everything first. Brent's demeanor subtly altered, a nearly imperceptible change. His jaw tightened briefly. However, he quickly regained his composure, adopting a more affable tone. I completely understand, he said smoothly. But the situation is that this car has 2 other potential buyers. One of them test drove it earlier today. I can't guarantee it will still be available tomorrow. You wouldn't want to miss out because of a minor consideration, would you? Monique blinked. Her fingers shifted around her envelope. Brent quietly lowered his voice, leaning closer. Listen, I've witnessed individuals leave, intending to consider it further overnight. Then the car was gone, and they were facing a situation that was more difficult and costly. You deserve something better, and this is it. He pushed the documents across to her. That was the end of it. Derek entered the office, maintaining a calm but resolute tone. That doesn't sound like the protection plan we provide, Brent said, blinking. Monique turned to Derek, appearing surprised. Brent quickly regained his composure. Pardon me? Derek repeated, the plan you're describing doesn't exist, not in that form. Brent lifted an eyebrow, assessing Derek. Do you work here? Something like that. Brent chuckled dryly. Look, I don't know who you are, but I've been here for 4 years. I know the packages inside and out. Derek pointed to the quote. Show me where it says full electronics coverage. Show me where VAR and etching is required. Show me the breakdown. Brent hesitated. It's in the system. Finance will explain it better. No, Derek said flatly. You explain it right now. Monique rose slowly in front of her, holding her baby close. Brent's face flushed. I don't have to deal with this. You're not even. But he stopped speaking. The general manager had just appeared behind Derek, his eyes wide. Mr. Belton, the manager said. Brent's mouth dropped open. Derek didn't smile, didn't say a word. He turned toward Monique. I'm sorry, he said softly. This isn't how we treat people. Not here, not under my name. But this wasn't over, not yet. The repercussions extended beyond a single falsehood. The room seemed to contract the instant the name, Mebleton, was spoken. Brent's complexion turned ashen. His assured demeanor disappeared, as if it were vapor on a chilled surface. Monique looked back and forth between the two men, bewildered, still cradling her baby, uncertain of the situation she's entered. Derek subtly turned to the general manager, standing in the doorway. He requested a conference room, speaking softly. Jeff Lorman, the manager, a man with a flushed face, nodded and indicated a hallway located at the rear of the showroom. Derek turned to Monique and spoke in a quiet, reassuring voice. "Please come with me. I want to correct this." She paused briefly, then followed. Her movements were deliberate but hesitant. The baby began to stir again, perhaps reacting to the palpable tension. As they passed the workstations, the entire level appeared to become silent. Telephones ceased their ringing, and conversations were interrupted. Several employees glanced over their workstations and angled towards one another, speaking quietly. Trevor, the lot attendant from earlier, positioned himself close to the entrance and offered Derek a knowing look, but remained silent. Within the compact, glass-enclosed conference room, Derek drew out a chair for Monique and settled opposite her. Jeff entered behind them, appearing noticeably uneasy. Brent followed, attempting to seem unconcerned but without success. He folded his arms and rested against the distant wall. Derek took the folder Brent had put on the table. "Is this the quote you gave her?" he asked, not looking up. Brent moved slightly. "Yes." Derek opened the folder, laid out the pages, and circled several numbers with a pen from the table's holder. "Explain these," he said. Brent sat up straighter. "Look, I don't know why I'm being questioned." "Explain them." Brent paused. He looked at Jeff, hoping for support, but Jeff avoided his gaze. "I mean, those are standard charges. Everyone includes them. Do you have documentation showing these fees were authorized?" Derek inquired. "They should be in the system." "No, they aren't," Derek replied, his voice gaining strength. "I was involved in revising the system. That VIN etching fee? It was discontinued in 2021. Powertrain coverage? It's limited to 5 years, not the comprehensive coverage you advertised. You added more than $2,000 in fabricated fees to a customer who came here simply trying to purchase a secure vehicle for her baby." Monique's hands trembled a little as she listened, but she did not speak. Her gaze remained on the document. "You stated the payment would be $349, Derek proceeded. "That is achievable only if she provides a down payment you failed to disclose. Furthermore, the interest rate you presented to her is inflated by a minimum of 2.5%. You are not just misleading Brent, you are being dishonest." Brent moved away from the wall and straightened. "I have consistently met my quarterly goals. Customers leave satisfied. I understand sales, all right?" Derek moved closer. "You know how to apply undue influence. A distinction exists." Jeff finally spoke. "Derek, I didn't know he was doing all that, I swear. We've been busy and the numbers have been good." "That's exactly the problem," Derek interjected. "You cared about the numbers, I cared about the people." Monique rose then, slowly, her face flushed with embarrassment and anger. "I thought this was a good place," she said quietly. "I really thought this was different." Derek turned to her. "It was supposed to be, and I'm sorry it wasn't." He reached into his back pocket, retrieved his wallet, and produced a card. "This is my direct line. I will personally ensure you receive a fair deal. If you desire the car, you'll obtain it at the correct price, free of unnecessary complications." She accepted the card deliberately. "Thank you," she said. "We'll have someone else manage the paperwork," Derek added. "Someone who doesn't fabricate figures." Brent's arms fell to his sides. "Clean out your desk," Derek stated, rising. "You are terminated here." There was no room for discussion. You were aware of that, yet disregarded it. Brent didn't object further. He left abruptly, speaking quietly to himself. No one pursued him. Derek addressed Jeff. "We aren't finished talking either." He stated, "I'll see you in your office in 10. Subsequently, he held the door for Monique and guided her back towards the lobby. People glanced around. Conversations began anew, subdued and apprehensive. Derek remained silent until they arrived at the reception desk. He regarded the woman seated there. "Did you greet her upon her arrival?" The receptionist hesitated, then swallowed. "I don't recall." Derek slowly shook his head. "Begin to recall." or begin searching. However, dismissing a single employee wouldn't resolve the underlying issues. Derek recognized that a cultural shift was necessary, or the company would decline from within. Derek was seated alone in Jeff Lorman's office, gazing out at the dealership floor through the blinds. A heavy silence filled the room. From behind the closed door, the usual showroom sounds had resumed. The usual sounds filled the office: casual chatter, the click of footsteps on tile, and ringing phones. However, a new feeling now permeated the atmosphere, a sense of unease. He glanced up as Jeff entered, his movements uncertain. The man appeared diminished, as if suddenly aware of his oversight. Jeff took a seat without prompting. "I was unaware," he said softly. "I truly swear to you, Derek, I wasn't aware Brent was engaging in that activity." "But you were aware of something," Derek responded. "You knew complaints were increasing. You were aware that deals were becoming more competitive. You were also aware that customer satisfaction scores decreased last quarter, and you attributed it to the surveys used." Jeff remained silent. Derek moved forward, resting his elbows on the desk. "What happened to what we created here?" he asked. "I thought we were performing well," Jeff stated. "The numbers were strong. Staff turnover was minimal. I assumed perhaps the industry simply shifted slightly." "The industry didn't shift," Derek responded, maintaining a calm tone. "We did. We lost sight of why people initially came here. We ceased prioritizing customer relationships and began focusing on achieving sales targets." Jeff sighed, massaging his face. "So what's the plan?" "We need a thorough overhaul," Derek stated, "and that extends beyond dismissing Brent. I require a review of every transaction from the past 90 days. Reimburse any clients where the terms weren't transparently conveyed. Furthermore, I want individual meetings with each salesperson. I need to understand their training processes, the priorities they receive, and to identify anyone else who believes it's acceptable to deceive customers with a friendly demeanor." Jeff acknowledged slowly. "And one more thing," Derek added, "I want Trevor in my office next week." Jeff blinked. "The lot kid?" Derek replied, "Yeah, he's one of the only ones who looked a customer in the eye today." "That matters." A knock at the door interrupted them. The receptionist appeared, visibly nervous. "Mr. Belton, the customer, Monique Ellis, is still in the lounge," she said. "She said she's waiting for her ride." Derek stood. "Please get her a bottle of water and offer her a seat in the private lounge, away from the plastic chairs near the vending machine. Make sure she feels valued." The receptionist acknowledged promptly and went to attend to the request. Derek returned to the showroom. Several employees glanced up, but there was no conversation. Some consciously avoided eye contact. Monique was situated in the far corner, her baby now asleep in the carrier beside her. She appeared weary, not only physically, but also emotionally drained. He approached her gently. "This is a lot," he admitted. "More than you anticipated," she replied with a gentle smile. "I've faced tougher situations," he stated. "I understand that, but you shouldn't have had to experience this," she said, shrugging. "People deceive me frequently. It happens at work, in shops, and even at the clinic. I'm accustomed to it." That comment resonated more deeply than he anticipated. "You shouldn't be exposed to that, certainly not here. That's my responsibility." She then focused on him, truly observing him. "Why did you come in today? Why are you dressed like that?" Derek offered a soft smile. She stifled a quiet chuckle, noting people rarely shared the full truth with the man in the suit. He then presented her with a small folder. "If you're still interested in that car, these are the accurate figures. There are no hidden details. I had our finance manager verify them directly. Furthermore, we've included a year of service maintenance at no cost." Her eyebrows rose in surprise. "Why?" He replied, "Because someone needs to remind this place of its values." Shortly after, a silver hatchback, distinguished by a missing hubcap, arrived to take her away. Her sister signaled from the driver's seat. Monique rose, corrected the carrier, and glanced back at Derek. "Don't let them ruin what you built," she said. "I won't," he replied. She exited without a backward look. But restoring Monique's confidence was not the only task. It involved rebuilding the confidence of every person who had ever entered those doors. Derek returned 3 days later. This time, there was no disguise, no cap, no jeans. He was dressed in a tailored navy suit and entered through the front doors as if he belonged. And in truth, he did. This wasn't intended as a display of dominance. It was a matter of responsibility. The entire staff had received notification that morning. Scheduled meetings were canceled, and phone lines were redirected to voicemail. The dealership remained open, but no sales transactions would occur prior to 11 a.m. Derek had arranged a company-wide meeting, and every employee attended, including those on part-time shifts. The group assembled in the break room, squeezed together amongst vending machines and aged chairs. Several were leaning against the walls. Trevor stood toward the rear, his arms crossed, but attentive. Jeff was seated near the front, a notebook open but unused. Derek addressed them, speaking plainly without a microphone or podium. I established this company in 2004, he began, not through investors or a franchise agreement, but with a used car lot situated behind a barbecue joint in Murfreesboro. During the first week, I sold 3 cars, personally washing each one. Some individuals quietly expressed amusement. At that time, I wasn't sure if I would succeed, but I possessed 2 valuable assets: my reputation and my commitment to honesty. I consistently ensured I could fulfill any promise made and avoided dishonesty when closing deals. The atmosphere in the room was now quiet. However, a significant shift has occurred, he continued. This isn't limited to a single salesperson. It's about how we compromise on minor details and prioritize speed over customer care. We've begun to see individuals as sales goals rather than human beings. That's not what I built. That's not who we are. He looked around the room. If you've ever included an additional charge because you believed you could, if you've ever hurried a woman out the door because she didn't appear to be able to afford our services, if you've ever spoken condescendingly to someone simply because you were able, today marks a turning point. A few people visibly expressed discomfort. You have a choice, he said. The situation demanded a resolution, either assistance or a new employment opportunity. Silence followed, then a voice spoke up. It was Trevor, Mr. Belton, and Derek turned to him. Yeah, Trevor said, appearing nervous, but proceeding anyway. What if some of us were performing well, but no one acknowledged it? Derek smiled. Then we need to start noticing. Starting today, he walked over and handed Trevor a small envelope. Inside was a letter of promotion, from lot attendant to junior sales associate, including full training and benefits. Trevor blinked. Are you serious? Derek stated, because the people who treat others with respect are the ones I want representing my name. Following the meeting, changes occurred rapidly. Brent's deals were reviewed. 5 of them necessitated full or partial refunds. Monique's case served as the focus of a training seminar. Every single manager was obligated to participate in a 3-week ethics and customer care workshop. Derek even re-engaged a retired employee. Arlene Cupp, a direct woman in her 60s who previously managed the front desk, had departed 2 years prior, citing a change in the atmosphere. She was now the new head of customer relations. Arlene's initial action involved installing a glass wall separating the sales desk and the finance office, ensuring transparency in all communications. Derek walked through the lot that Friday, observing the staff's interactions. A subtle shift permeated the atmosphere, not flawless, but calmer, more deliberate, stemming from understanding rather than apprehension. He observed a young salesperson patiently explaining trim-level differences to an older gentleman, ensuring he was heard. This detail, absent from any spreadsheet, held greater significance than any monthly performance goal. Arlene approached. It appears they recall their employer, she remarked, and rightfully so. Derek responded, stating he wasn't leaving, although one element remained. The core reason for this endeavor needed to be revisited. That Sunday morning, Derek was seated on the porch of his mother's former residence in Jackson, Tennessee. The sun had just begun to rise, and the air retained the stillness of the early hours. He took his coffee slowly, looking out at the yard he previously mowed every Saturday during his teenage years. Years had passed since her passing, yet the atmosphere of the place remained unchanged. Now, it belonged to him, recollection solidified in brick and wood. He retrieved a photograph from his jacket pocket. The image faded with curled edges. The picture showed him, no older than 10, standing next to his mother before a dull, rust-colored Oldsmobile. Her smile was broad and proud, not due to the car's newness, as it wasn't, but because it was hers. That marked the day she purchased her first vehicle independently. He recalled how she, a nurse, managed without a co-signer or assistance, relying solely on her paycheck and a salesman who painstakingly explained each document before she signed. Derek remembered her meticulously verifying every detail. He remembered her asking questions, even when her voice wavered, and how the man behind the desk never made her feel inadequate for doing so. He remembered that. And now, decades later, he occupied the man's position behind the desk. He was the man whose name appeared above the showroom. He was the person who influenced every customer's experience upon entering. He looked at the picture once more. That instance profoundly impacted him, teaching him that dignity wasn't something acquired through wealth. It was something inherent, deserved simply by being present and making an effort. The world hadn't been kind to his mother, but on that day, she received recognition, and he carried that with him. Returning to the dealership the following week, Derek requested a new plaque be installed by the entrance. The message stated that we treat each customer as if they were purchasing their first car, demonstrating dignity, patience, and honesty. It wasn't intended for widespread attention or media coverage. The goal was for every employee to read it daily. Trevor read it every morning, first thing. Monique returned a month later to have her car serviced. She entered wearing a hoodie, holding her daughter, and smiled upon seeing Trevor at the desk. "You remember me?" she asked. He smiled in return. "Of course I do. We had her in that silver Corolla, correct?" She affirmed. "She's performing well." They continued their conversation briefly, covering minor details, and the interaction felt comfortable, because now it felt natural. Derek observed from his office, unnoticed, simply watching. He didn't require attention. He desired none. The focus wasn't on him. The purpose was this: you don't establish a successful business solely on profit. You build it on trust, on the manner in which you treat people when you believe no one is observing. He learned that from his mom. He communicated this to others via Brent. And now, with each handshake, each sale, each explanation provided without pressure or misleading information, he was restoring it. Incrementally, deliberately, that's what integrity truly represents. Not something asserted, something safeguarded. For once lost, regaining it demands all your resources. And Derek Belton refused to allow his reputation to signify anything other than honesty. If this story resonated with you personally, if it brought to mind a time you felt disregarded, or a time someone championed you when they weren't obligated to, please subscribe. We have more stories coming that speak to the heart, not just the headline.